So I recently discussed all of the weird yet wonderful zombie action that I really vibed with in the Thousand Year Blood War, but I didn't want to drop a big rant about a somewhat separate thing in the middle of all of that because something was happening congruently with the necromancy fight that wasn't nearly as enjoyable for me, so I decided to give this topic its own video instead. This probably won't be very long, but wouldn't have felt right to discuss with the zombies, and frankly, I needed more time to properly formulate my thoughts on this part of the battle because, yes, this is going to be somewhat of a rant. Apologies in advance to fans of Stern Ritter L, if you exist. First, we'll start with something a little more positive, as we see that Byakuya made short work of some of the other Stern Ritters. In concept, this is a super badass display from him back in the fight and taking on people on his own. However, this was off-panel in the manga, so that was a little disappointing, but at least the anime made up for it a little bit. It's just fun to see even some of the more minor enemies have an extra few moments of showing what they've got, and the anime gave us that. It gives them a few extra chances to show what they can do, but also helps bolster Byakuya by actually seeing him defeat them. Was it entirely necessary to show this? Maybe not, but I enjoyed the few extra beats that we got. Some of these characters have had solid introductions, and they weren't introduced simply as fodder like the 3 that Kenny killed early on in the first invasion, so I appreciate them being beaten in front of me instead of off-paneled. They might not have been given full-blown fights or anything, but it was still something at least, so it was a nice little addition. After Byakuya handily beats them, whether it was off-panel or on-screen, he's confronted by Hisagi, who starts trying to kill him because he's fallen under the control of Pepe. You know, the Stern Ritter with the staff who was controlling Soul Reaper scientists to hurt each other when they first attacked. And honestly, Hisagi just can't catch a break. I keep waiting for him to get a big moment or something. I don't know that that'll ever come. He's beaten time and time again, which is a real shame after he shined so brightly in the latter stages of the Arrancar arc. And here, he's lost his own will and his own agency as a character, but at least the moment that was revealed was interesting enough, I guess. But again, poor Hisagi is being given no opportunities to shine, but through him we're shown that this isn't just mind control like it first seemed. It turns out, like all Pepes that have ever Pepe'd, Pepe is focused on love, kind of. His power forces souls to be devoted to him. So it's different than simple mind control, which was what I initially believed it was when I made my guess that his shrift was going to be M for the mind, because it's actually L for the love, but I could think of another meaning for that letter when it comes to Pepe. I'm just saying. As far as Pepe himself, I'm really not a big fan of this character. Like at all. To kind of keep things focused on what we've been discussing recently, let's compare him to Gigi, who is obviously a pretty unhinged character, and her treatment of people and her desecration of the dead and the dying is some of the more disturbing stuff that we've seen in the series, but Gigi still felt more interesting, or was at least more fun to watch, while Pepe just kind of lacks that same entertainment value and isn't very fun, while still also being pretty much just as disturbing and gross as Gigi. He didn't have the balance that Giselle had for me as an antagonist, which may seem weird to say considering Gigi gleefully plays with blood and dead things, but Pepe's whole vibe is just really abhorrent and off-putting, but there's no layer of macabre fun like there was with Giselle. Because when you really think about it, Pepe is essentially using his power to force people to love him against their will, which is, you know, the optics for that aren't great. His whole character vibe is kind of this pervy offender kind of guy. He's just apparently meant to be this walking aphrodisiac forcing devotion from others. I've never really vibed with this type of storyline. I've never really vibed with like love potions. It's all just very, I don't know. I don't like it. Never have. A lot of shows and series and movies have done that kind of thing, and I don't think it really ever works. And this is no exception. I don't think this really worked at all, but I digress. Now, I actually like the idea that someone with the power of love is not, like, conventionally attractive, you know? Another series might have had a handsome, chiseled man or a beautiful woman as the enemy with this power. So it's kind of a nice subversion on the surface, but beyond that, Pepe's just this unpleasant character, and not in an enjoyably evil kind of way. He just comes off as pathetic and gross, and his design doesn't help in his intimidation factor, though, especially once he transforms. And sure, I can see Kubo is going for like a Cupid, cherub aesthetic, but it's a warped, twisted version of that really burns my eyes. Kubo, what are we doing here? Why did you make it like this? Like, I get it, but it just feels strange, and it doesn't end up amounting to much either. And it's too goofy looking to be cool, and too gross and uncomfortable to be fun for me. I don't really know what we're doing with all of this. I don't know what the thought process was to have this be the enemy that we have to contend with right now. And it's especially a letdown when I think back to his like kind of soft introduction when he was this mostly unseen force that was making Soul Reapers attack each other. That was scary, but it turns out he was much more threatening as that hidden foe than once he shows himself. But even then, he's kind of been built up a lot, at least in the manga where he was slowly being hyped up as being something that we will need to worry about in the future. The anime unfortunately removed some of those little moments of giving him this reputation, but maybe that was because by the time it was animated, they knew that he wasn't gonna live up to some of those kind of hype building moments. Because what we get with him just isn't really much of anything. Yes, this is showing a dark side of love and this like violent, unearned devotion, but it just comes off as like gross and annoying more than anything else, which is a shame. There could have been something really cool here, but it all feels wasted on someone that feels like one of the most unimpressive Sternritter. I think it would have been great if someone who had the power of love was actually like really one of the most dangerous. Maybe these abilities could be used in an extremely dangerous way, but the execution of these ideas and kind of this brief period that we see this, it never really amounts to much. Another thing that I'm not huge on is that his fight with Byakuya is kind of uninteresting, and at times it even feels like a retread. We've seen Byakuya go up against someone trying to tag him with power to take away his autonomy. It's not exactly like Zamari was, but it's similar enough that it took me out of it, that I noticed like, oh, Byakuya's once again fighting someone that's, you know, trying to remove his control, or fighting someone that's kind of turning his sword against him. Like, maybe there's a theme there that Kubo's playing with, that Byakuya, you know, is dealing with his own control and who he is and all that stuff, but it feels like a repeat, and it's not that interesting and it's not that fun of a fight. And it's especially kind of underwhelming when it's smack in the middle of the much more interesting zombie fight going on at the same time that I talked about last video. I've had my say about Byakuya's survival. You all know I have. I've talked about it probably too much. I've talked a lot about that, and my hopes that his return will feel worth it, but this battle didn't exactly help add to my support of his recovery. It didn't convince me more that this was a good thing that Byakuya survived. And worse, it also didn't add much to Byakuya's character, or at least didn't take advantage of the possibilities that could have been there with his character. Like, one of the most personal things we know about Byakuya is how his life was changed by the love he had with his late wife, the risks he was willing to take for love, and how the loss of that love really hardened his heart for a while and led to the rocky relationship he had with Rukia and his perception of how he should be in general, of how he should act and how he should not act. That all came from a lost love, and that revelation of that lost love in Byakuya's past was the key that helped really define this character as more than a rigid antagonist, and that made me actually start to like him. It was the whole epicenter of who he was. Does any of Byakuya's tragic love story play into this battle with the Sternritter of love? Like, at all? No. Not at all. So this just feels like a waste, unfortunately, because there could have been something interesting there. There could have been something we could have kind of really anchored this fight in some emotions, especially when you're dealing with love. But instead, it doesn't feel like we're dealing with love as much as we're dealing with like a creepy old guy who's roofing people. We had an opportunity to maybe toss around ideas of different kinds of love just a little bit. What we're left with isn't all that deep. despite Pepe's monologues about it, because whereas Asnot's philosophies on fear were informative of who he is and where he came from and gave his opponents a chance to contend with their own instincts, Pepe's concepts of love feel so empty in comparison. It all just feels like a lot of hot air. The whole thing just felt a little half-baked, you know what I mean? The underwhelming fight itself definitely felt undercooked for sure, but even Pepe as a whole. There are so many Sternritter, and because of that, it's been a concession from the start, something that I've accepted and that everyone should accept with this amount of enemies, that everyone isn't going to be able to get as much focus or shine as brightly as others. There's just not enough pages or episodes to make sure that everyone pops, but Pepe just feels like such a loser with nothing really helping bolster the character at all. He wasn't interesting, he wasn't fun, he wasn't cool, he wasn't scary, he just felt like a waste of time and energy, and his defeat didn't help show us anything new about his opponent either. With how Pepe was just kind of thrown in the midst of the zombie stuff before quickly being dispatched, it's like Kubo realized he just needed to get rid of him. We'll do a little thing, a little fight where I'll show what the love shrift is, and then we'll get rid of him. And I'm just like, okay, cool. It's a shame because just before this fight, Kubo seems to take some of these other Quincy's off the board, and I weep at the fact that any of them might have been more fun to see more of than Pepe. I understand taking Candace Catnip out. She already kind of had her time in the spotlight for a little bit, but Najagoop has a zany design and a name that's fun to say going for him, and while I can joke about Robert having a pretty normal name and his resemblance to Commissioner Gordon, the fact is, Robert took out Shunsui's eye and has a mysterious briefcase, and he's got guns, and he had to have been better than Pepe. He had to have been. I would love to see Robert go one-on-one with someone and reveal more about him, rather than what we got here. And maybe we still will. Maybe we'll still see Robert face someone, but for now, it feels like he got kind of swept aside for this. And I don't love this, that's for sure. And while it was cathartic and nice to see Pepe get pummeled by my visored zombies, it all just feels inconsequential, really. It feels like an afterthought that was very underwhelming for everyone. For me, for Byakuya, and for any hope that Pepe would be one of the better Sternritter, which he is definitely not. The fact that Pepe was beaten by zombies also kind of felt like a meta way of Kubo acknowledging that the zombie part was much better than this part of the story. And the last thing we see of Pepe, he does kind of get more of a definitive comeuppance where it seems like he's about to be devoured by Liltotto, which I kind of love because I like Liltotto. First of all, I especially like Liltotto way better than Pepe. But Pepe using, his own allies, forcing them to be devoted to him, that was kind of a thing with his character as well, and I like that came back to literally bite him, and that sometimes love can be a hunger in some ways. So there is something about that I really like, but it kind of says a lot that the only thing I really like about Pepe is how he's killed, I guess. But I hope this is the end of him. I hope it's not one of those things like in Fullmetal Alchemist where Pepe lives on within Liltotto after being eaten, because I kind of want him gone, and I'm okay if Liltotto is the one that takes him out. So I did kind of love that. Personally, I think this is easily the weakest part of the 1,000-Year Blood War so far, like without question. I didn't really enjoy these chapters. I didn't really enjoy that episode, or that section of the episode. I would have preferred maybe any other Sternritter fighting Byakuya. I would have preferred not really touching on this at all. With what we got, in retrospect, I would have been okay if Pepe was beaten off screen by Byakuya, if it would have spared me some of the sights I have now seen. Yeah. Sadly, I just didn't love this. But with everything going on, I'm excited to see if I love what's coming next. Thank you so much for watching. Sorry about the rant. Sorry it's a bit negative, but I'm always going to be completely honest about how I feel about this series, and this is just a lower point for me, Like, I don't usually go on just kind of rants about characters, but I don't love this. I don't. And I hope we can shift into something much better from here, because this was just a low point. It's a low point. But thanks for bearing with me. I hope I didn't offend anyone. I hope there isn't a massive Pepe fan base that's gonna come for my head. I didn't love it. I didn't love it. But as always, If you like this, please comment, like, subscribe. If you want to see more content, there's a lot of read-alongs and anime reactions over on the Patreon, which is a lot of fun. I'll see you guys soon, hopefully to talk about something much better. All right, see you guys later. Bye.